The strongest argument for cancelling student debt is actually the argument from inequality, and that student debt is just causing the gap between rich and poor to get worse and worse. So to understand this argument, I think the best way is to firstly picture a student who doesn't have any student debt. He went to college, but all of his tuition, all his board was paid for either by his parents or someone else. And this wasn't because he had a scholarship, it wasn't any merit-based system. It was just that he was lucky enough, basically, to have someone who could pay for his tuition. When he comes out of college, what he's going to be able to do is use 100% of income in order to grow his own wealth. So what I mean by that is he's going to be able to use all of his income from day one to do things like to buy a house, to invest in shares if he wants to. And over time, that can make a huge difference. For example, just the ability to buy a house 5 years earlier than your peers can make a huge difference. You compare that then to the student who, through no fault of their own, has no assistance to go to college. They have to pay their own way, they have to take out a big loan, they have to potentially get a part-time job just to support themselves while at college. When they get out of college, since they've got to pay, 20, 30% of their income, it depends on the loan, because they've got to pay such a large chunk, they can't compete with the first person. Like, they will have to wait, like I said, to buy a house. They probably won't have the money to invest in shares. They are inherently disadvantaged from day one. And anyone who understands how compound interest works, you can see why that becomes an increasing problem over time. So even if it's only a differential, say, of having $50,000 when they start out, that $50,000 can turn into a huge sum. It can turn into potentially $1 million difference within 10, 20 years because of the way that our finance system works. And of course, the problem with that is that person A, because of those advantages, is going to be much more likely to be able to pay for the tuition for their kids, right? Like, they're going to be able to support their kids more and potentially give their kids the same advantage they had. Whereas person B will be far less likely to be able to do so unless they, really work really hard. And to be honest, get lucky. They won't be able to do the same for their kids. And that's a huge disadvantage. And so you can see how this problem is not just a one generation issue, but it is a compounding issue over time. And it gets worse and worse. So the gap between rich and poor gets wider and wider apart. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix generational inequality. It's not going to fix the wealth gap. But what it does is it at least evens the playing field somewhat and says to people who have these huge amounts of debt, we're going to help you out. We're going to step in. The government's going to step in and say, we're going to give you some help and we're going to forgive this debt. And what that will do is it will give them then control of their full income. It will then give them the chance to do some of the things they haven't been able to. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the damage for a lot of the people that we're talking about forgiving their debt, a lot of the damage has already been done. Like I said, 5 years of having a full access to your income can make a huge difference to your overall wealth. Massive. So for a lot of these people, right, it's in a sense, it's almost too late. They've already been screwed by the system. But what all this will do will at least now will say to them, look, just like your peers, now you're going to be able to use all of your income to further your life, to better your life. And in doing so, hopefully you will be able to climb a little bit further up the ladder. Like I said, it's not a silver bullet. It's not perfect by any means. But what it does is it just gives those people a little leg up on their competitors. And I think that's really, really worthwhile. I think it's especially worthwhile when you consider that, it's no secret that in America, these inequality lines, they're not just random, right? They break down along racial lines. If your skin isn't white, basically, you are much more likely to be in person B category. You're much more likely to start off life with disadvantages than you are advantages. And that's why I think that cancelling student debt is a really good option, not just in general, but is a really good way of actually trying to close some of those racial inequality gaps that exist currently inherently in our society.